again with Facebook Live on Facebook. And Ian's with me this time, so he's, coaching me. So thanks for coming back, or if it's your first time, welcome. I'm really happy to see you. This is the show where I answer your gardening questions. So you have to go to my Facebook account, my Facebook page, I guess it's called. Go to my website. You can find that. Click to Facebook at the bottom. Wait a minute, you're already here. Otherwise, forget about it. You're already here. If you're already here, welcome. Thank you for coming. Okay, well, it was a busy week last week. I was down to film tape a little segment for Cheryl McKay on North by Northwest. If you're in BC, you might have caught that. If you don't wake up at 7:15 in the morning, you might have missed it. So we will be posting that at some point here, and you'll be able to hear it a second time. I've also been busy writing again, and I wrote an article for the Herald, and that comes out this Thursday. That article is about the Silver Springs Golf Course, and sorry, I shouldn't have said golf course. It's not the golf course. It's the Botanical Garden of Silver Springs. But what I was going to say is make you guess where the only botanical garden that allows off-leash dogs is. So now you've heard the answer. I'm not a good stand-up comic. You can see that. Okay, I've got my book. Of course I've got my book. I've got lots of books, but this is my current book. This is the 3-year Gardener's Gratitude Journal, part diary, part personal growing guide. And that's it. It's not just about me, although, there's a lot about me in here. You see how I filled in all these pages? It's crazy. But it's about you. It's a place that you can go and write in your own book. Tell yourself what the garden's like this year right now so that you can then compare for 3 years in a row, because it's a 3-year journal for you to track your own garden. Very excited. That just came out in February, so it's still considered a very new book. I want to shout out to Nikki Jabor. She had me on her show last week in Halifax, and I've been talking about Halifax all week, and she is a really fun, where's her book? I had it here. There it is. I actually participated in a book with Nikki. It's the Groundbreaking Food Garden. So if you haven't seen that book, Nikki has 3 or 4 books out now. Veggie Garden Remix is her newest book. But this is the one that I also wrote a little chapter in. So it's kind of fun. It talks about my back patio. So Nikki Jabor is a really great horticulturist. She has a gardening show in Halifax. So thanks, Nikki. It was great that you were able to share things last week and interview me on your show. In big news, I don't know if you know this, but I am the brand ambassador for not Alberta. I always want to say Alberta. I am the brand ambassador for BC Greenhouses. BC Greenhouses actually sounds like they sell only in BC, but they don't. They sell right across North America. Angela told me a really cool story. She said that last year when there was all that storming and flooding in Texas, people had water up to almost to the roof line on their greenhouse. And when the water drained, it all just went away. Hurricanes are no problem for a BC greenhouse. Now, I'm not gardening where there's hurricanes, but you've probably seen my greenhouse in a lot of the little segments, the little jobs in the garden. I was out there chopping the head off my cauliflower. Last week, I was painting my zucchini so that I could transfer the pollen from the males to the females. So people really love these little segments, and we love to film them in there, don't we, Ian?
We do. It's awesome. It's a fantastic space to work in.
Yeah, and the light's nice, and Ian likes light. He's all about light.
I'm obsessed about the light.
So we have more plans to film more in that little greenhouse. So every segment isn't around the greenhouse, but I just wanted to tell you that BC Greenhouses is my sponsor, and I am their brand ambassador. So I just wanted to put that out there. All right. What's that?
I say hello.
Oh, Lori's saying hi. Hi, Lori. Good to hear from you. Thank you.
And Liz.
And Liz is there too? Oh, wow. Hey, Liz. You expect me to be able to read that tiny little print while I'm also reading my notes and talking.
I'll do it next time.
Okay. So nice to see you following along. That's just great. I did have a Facebook Live. Was it Facebook Live? No, on Messenger. Corey asked a question on behalf of her brother. It wasn't the right place to ask questions. I want you to come in if you can through this format. But Corey's question's about her brother's bamboo. It's funny, a couple of weeks ago we had a question from a friend, Karen, about her friend Lori's. So you're not all on Facebook, we get it, but you can just pass those questions on to your friends. So Corey's question from her brother is about her bamboo, which has been growing in a pot. It's brown and even turning black, and it doesn't look good. Well, I think, Corey, that your brother forgot to water his bamboo this winter. He might be telling you he waters. I know when I leave my plants alone here in the greenhouse, sometimes I come back and my little babies are all wilted, but the pot's wet. And that's because my helpful husband gets in and waters it on the day I get home. So maybe your brother hasn't been watering his bamboo enough. That's what happened to me. I actually killed a bamboo the same way. So I have personal experience there. So he just has to actually, I think, start fresh, pull that whole plant out, and just start fresh. Bamboo is fabulous in pots, but only if you can really keep it watered. And that's hard to do during the winter, and it's hard to keep it watered in the off season as well. And of course, if you're not living, I once, when I was in Calgary, I had 3 huge bamboos in pots out front of my house. Everybody stopped by to ask about it, but it is a seasonal plant if you're growing anywhere other than the West Coast. So we also had some questions. Oh, a question from Colleen Parker. She tried really hard to get it through to us, and so we're going to just say to you, thank you, Colleen. Again, she's writing on behalf of a friend in Okotoks. Now, Okotoks, if you haven't been there, is windy and cold and Chinooki. It's a crazy frosty area to live. And Colleen was trying to find out how she could help her friend get her rhubarb established. Rhubarb is usually super hardy, super tough, but there is one particular problem it gets, and that's a virus on the leaves. I know this because why do I have all the problems first? I have every problem that's ever happened, and I had the virus, and it just turns the veins red, and then it's better not to plant back in that same spot. So Colleen, if your friend has had problems in that same spot more than once, there could be a virus in the soil. Otherwise, I recommend with rhubarb, although it loves full sun, it can't be sitting out in the heat all day. So it's really better to have an east or east and south exposure. If it has full sun from east, south, west, if it's got sun all day, every day, it's going to be too hot. It'll tend to dry out. So when you're trying to get a rhubarb established, try to establish it in an area that's east or east-south facing. And then that gives it lots of light, but it doesn't get too much light. And make sure to mulch that as soon as you plant it, because that keeps the soil evenly moist.
Awesome. Carrie Andrews says hi, so we'll say hi to Carrie.
Hey, hi, Carrie. Thanks for joining us.
All right, that's a good question. What about aphids on people's lupins? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, lupins, I always say aphids are attracted when you have lots of nitrogen. And so people say, I haven't over-fertilized, and they haven't. Well, maybe they have, and they're just lying and they haven't. But lupins are one of those very few plants that produces their own nitrogen. So they are almost always plagued by aphids because they're so rich in nitrogen, and everything in the whole wide world needs nitrogen. It's part of our DNA. It's how we build our DNA. So lupins are particularly susceptible to aphids. Before you act, if you've got aphids on your lupin, before you act and do anything about it, get in there with a magnifying glass, have a look, because what you'll often find that there are beneficial bugs out there. So aphids are really weak. They're really soft and mushy, and there's so many other things out there like hoverflies and syrphid wasps and ladybugs that will all get in there and eat those aphids for you. So just get a hand lens on that and make sure that you've not got anything that's really beneficial. I wouldn't, otherwise some people would hose it down, but then you might wash off the beneficial. So just sit back and let it play its course. If it's driving you crazy, you can cut off the seed heads just as they're starting to get really packed with bugs. That's what I would do.
Okay, and you're kind of excited to talk about peonies this week.
I am, because I was down at GARDENER'S on Saturday, and I had a lot of people coming over there. I think they thought I was a master gardener, which is a pretty nice thing to be. I'm not. I've actually taught the Master Gardener course. I actually am a horticulturist, if that didn't come through any other way. And I actually am really always excited to answer questions. So the Master Gardeners were there, they left, and then I sat down in the same spot. So it was logical. People came over and asked me. And I had a question from a lady who wondered why her peony is no longer blooming. Peonies, and she wondered if it was too old. I just want to say peonies are never too old. They could be between 20 years and 80 years, and hers was only 10. So I suspect what happened to her peony, because the little buds that come from underground are very sensitive to how deep they are covered. So they want to be about an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter, and anything deeper than that, you're not going to bloom. So, of course, you're thinking, well, I planted it right. I followed that instruction in the book, or I planted it right out of the pot. But over time, we layer mulch on top of our on top of our plants, especially peonies. We might have leaves that have fallen that have built up, and they form a little layer of soil on top of the peony, and then it gradually gets it too deep. So what I suggested to the lady that stopped me and asked me about this, and it's almost peony blooming season everywhere. They're really coming into full bloom. So what I suggested was that she go around the roots and just try to pull back if there's extra material. In the worst case scenario, something I had to do when I used to work as the horticulturist at the Calgary Zoo, we had to dig up the whole collection because we had planted them all 2 inches deep and nothing was blooming. And we were all trained gardeners, so there you go. You can't judge by that. Anyway, we replanted them all in. We put them all in about 1 inch deep, and that helped. So that'll be her worst case scenario. The best time to transplant peonies is in the fall. So that'll be happening this fall. She can't do it right away.
Okay. Gio Miletto, he wants to know, Donna, he says, I know that you've got kiwis. Gio lives in Vancouver. Okay. He says, do you need a male and a female plant in order to get fruit?
If you're growing the old-fashioned, hairy, big kiwis, that like the ones you buy at the store, those ones will only grow in these warmer climates, like on the West Coast. And in that case, you almost always need a male and a female plant, and you put them together, you need 1 male for every 3 to 4 females. But, I bought a new variety this spring, and it's called Jenny. Jenny is self-pollinating. Jenny doesn't need Jacob. Jenny is fine on her own. So I put Jenny in beside my male and my female, and then Jenny, and it's just going to be a little experiment to see if she blooms as good. It's also a large fruited peony. When I worked at the Calgary Zoo, we actually had the little tiny miniature kiwis, which are just like big berries, and those ones as well, you do have to have a male and a female. So except for Jenny, which is the new one I found this spring, you usually have to have a male and a female if you expect to get fruit. If you're just looking for a really pretty vine, you don't have to do anything special. Just buy a male, and then the males have a really pretty white edge on the leaf, and that's really quite fun to have in your garden, climbing up your trellis.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Someone here says, I've purchased some of this seaweed extract. Does anyone use this product? How well does it work? You're into seaweed.
I love seaweed. I've loved it for years, and I've been buying it already mixed with water. So it's liquid seaweed, and sometimes it's called kelp. Now, kelp is a type of seaweed. It's the one that's found out in the deep water, and it's often certified organic because it's out in the oceans, although who knows about the oceans anymore. But the kelp or seaweed that is a liquid is mixed with water, and then when you're transplanting things, you pour just a little bit in, and it's like a starter fertilizer. It doesn't have any of the big numbers, like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, or maybe just tiny little amounts, but what it does have is all the micronutrients. So if you've ever had a cold and someone says, oh, you're short on zinc, it's because it's one of those tiny micronutrients. So that's what we get from kelp, and that's why when I transplant or put together a basket, I like to water it in with some liquid kelp. I also like kelp so much that I bought the dry kelp, and I sometimes top dress my gardens just with a little sprinkle of kelp. And I really like that. It is just like a preventative, and it helps you with a lot of those little bits of, as I said, micronutrients that aren't maybe as obvious. If you use just the big fertilizers, the 20-20-20 or something like that, you don't get the micronutrients. And the plants need it all. They need everything.
Okay. And you've got these really awesome flowers in front of you. Why don't we talk about what sorts of plants attract hummingbirds?
Well, I try to get pictures of hummingbirds. And again, when I was at GardenWorks, I got just a little smidgen of a second of hummingbirds because as soon as I walk outside with my camera, they take off. So I've been trying really hard. We used to have a hummingbird feeder, but we noticed that the males come to it and they start to fight. And we've actually read online that the males will kill each other. They will fight to the death over your hummingbird feeder. And I was like, forget about it. And I took my feeder down, and instead I'm trying to grow flowers that hummingbirds like. So okay, this is something that blooms in the summer, and one of the favorite things they like in the full sun is the salvia. There are many types of perennial salvias. This is, you're going to love this, Ian. This is the hot lips salvia. It's got the white top and the red bottom.
I like it.
Yeah, I know, like the mass show, right? Hot lips. So it's half-hardy perennial. If you're not familiar with that term, what it means is it won't live in Calgary or Winnipeg or anything like that. It'll survive on the warmer coastal climates and maybe a zone 5, 6, maybe 6, 7. So this perennial salvia can be used as an annual. I just bought it at the grocery store last year. So sometimes they're just there for sale. You buy it. But there are some true annuals. This one's one of the Victoria. I don't know if you can see that. It looks a bit like a lavender.
Yep.
And it's an annual salvia. And that also has just the beautiful little flower that has a little tube. So what your hummingbirds are looking for is a flower with a tube shape. So they could come in, take their little sip, and then back off. I brought a whole selection in. Here's another one. And these are all different types of salvias that are all good for really hot and sunny locations. Or if you just can't water as much as you'd like to, you can buy them as perennials and use them as annuals. That's if you're in the full sun. What if you're in the shade?
What happens?
What are you going to do? Well, you can't grow salvias. They need to have full sun. But you can grow, look at this. People always wonder about these crazy little fuchsias. This is a funny little plant, usually put into hanging baskets, but you can actually put them into any pot. I've seen the hummingbirds come up and go into them because, again, they've got that red color, which hummingbirds love, and they've got the tube shape, which they can get access to all of the nectar that's in there. So this is a shade plant. So hummingbirds, if they're in your shade, in your garden, in the shade, they can help themselves to fuchsias. Now, there's lots of other flowers. People just have to go through their memory, what they've seen things on. I've actually seen hummingbirds on my peas, and those are white, so they're not even colored. So I've seen hummingbirds on my peas, on my scarlet runner beans, out in the vegetable garden. And I've also seen them just on common garden perennials like delphiniums and anything that's really got, like columbines. Columbines have that big tube, so they can get right inside. So just look around, make some observations, write it down in your journal. And if you observe a hummingbird approaching some of your flowers, you'll know. I've actually seen them even in geraniums. Again, they're very attracted to that red color. They don't always come back because some of the hybrids don't have the same amount of nectar as some of these old-fashioned plants do. But those hummingbirds are going to keep trying. And my goal in my garden is to try to plant hummingbird-friendly things all over the garden so that we don't have those big fights breaking out and those males killing each other. I want to have hummingbirds everywhere. I want them to be really welcome. And that's why we added something extra special.
What?
Ian's wondering, what did you add? We added the new hummingbird bird bath last year.
Oh,
yeah. So most bird baths are quite deep, and hummingbirds, if they get in there, they might drown. And we know already that when bees go into deeper water, they drown. They can't swim. And honeybees and all kinds of bees need moisture. They're always looking for moisture. So even a kid's swimming pool, there's a good chance they'll go in and they'll be drowned. And your swimming pool will be full of dead bees. So if you're looking to keep your hummingbirds and your bees alive, you need to have a very shallow water feature. So we found one that the water just flows over the surface, and it's really never more than a couple of millimeters deep. And just the other day, there was a hummingbird in taking a drink from it, and then he started taking a little bath. It was really cute. Yeah, so the hummingbirds need a bath. They need, they want to get rid of all those little ticks and fleas and things that they have, but also they need a drink. So you have to give them food, you have to give them a drink. And surprisingly, hummingbirds will then be able to go out and eat bugs. They eat a lot of aphids, and we've talked about aphids already, but they'll, especially if you've got a lupin, they love that kind of shape of flower. They'll get in there, they'll see the aphids. So most of what they find in hummingbird stomachs when scientists, not me, but when scientists are looking for this, they find their stomachs are packed with bugs. So they need the nectar, they need the liquids, but they also need bugs.
And I've seen loads of them flying around your garden right now. I'm just looking through the window, and they like the hostas. I'm surprised by that.
I know. Hostas are another shade plant, but they have those really nice, tall purple flowers that they get that are really sometimes scented, sometimes not. But they, again, have the tubular flowers. So if you're trying to attract hummingbirds, that's what you're really looking for, is those tubular flowers, preferably red. Possibly, if you're in the full shade, you'll do something like a hosta or a fuchsia. And if you're in the full sun, you'll do something like a geranium or a salvia.
Yeah. And look, Liz Parsons says, I have a hanging basket with begonias in a shady spot at my front door. The hummingbirds are loving it.
Yeah. Well, if they come and then keep coming back, that means that you've got a begonia that has a lot of nectar in it. So Liz probably has one with more or less the single flowers. Sometimes you see those really fully double flowers, and there's so many petals they can't get into the nectar, but she must have one of those special begonias that actually has some of the nectar in it. And it's just something you won't know until you observe if you've got hummingbirds there or not. Lots of fun. I love attracting hummingbirds to the garden.
Okay, that's really awesome. Good in the garden. What's good in the garden this week, Donna?
Good in the garden this week. I had so many people ask this question just last week when I was speaking, and also when I was down in GardenWorks. People want to know where they can get ladybugs. They've been reading online that you can order ladybugs. They'll come in and they'll clean up all your aphids. And I want to tell you that is not good in the garden, because most of the ladybugs that are for sale that you're purchasing have come in from California, where they've been wild collected. And that's never a good thing. One of the just recently I got on Messenger a message from a producer of beneficial bugs. And she said they simply cannot raise them. They're too difficult to raise. So ladybugs almost always come in from California. They're wild collected. So I think good in the garden this week is to encourage your garden to make a beautiful haven for ladybugs. So it's going to be the same as some of the other things. We're going to have water that they can drink. We're going to have covers. So if we leave some leaves, a little bit of, I'm not too clean in the garden. I like to leave a few things lying around. Ladybugs like that. They like to have a place to go for a refuge if it gets cold or we get a storm. Also the bark on trees, or if you have a wood pile, they'll go into that wood pile. So make your garden a haven for honeybee or a haven for ladybugs, and they'll come to you. If you have a few aphids, if you're not spraying to get rid of the aphids, the ladybugs will find you. They will come over, and if there's a spot that they can have a drink of water, a nice shallow water area, as well as lots of food for them. So they like to have a lot of pollen and nectar. If they can't find aphids, this is how they stay alive until they get to the aphids, until the aphid outbreak comes to your garden. So the kinds of things that are really great for that are things like alyssum. I think I don't have any here. Here's a little ornamental onion. They have a lot of nectar and a lot of pollen in them. So ladybugs need pollen. They need nectar, and then when the time is right, they will lay their eggs where there are a lot of aphid colonies, and that's good in the garden this week.
Okay, that's good. So they like messiness a little bit.
A little bit, like the leaves and the mulch at the bottom of the plants. It's just better for them than if everything's too clean and tidy, because they do have to find refuge if it gets cold. And we just had a cold spell here, and I think they've had cold spells across North America this last week.
Okay, great. Back to a few questions. Donna, people are talking about, is it called a leaf miner?
Yeah.
Because I'm hearing a lot of people saying that they've got bugs on their lilacs and it's causing the leaf to turn brown around the edges. Is that a leaf miner?
No, a leaf miner is between the two layers of the leaves. So it's a little insect that has an ovipositor. I like that word. It sticks its little bum sort of into the leaf, but it lays the egg between the two layers of the leaves. And we get leaf miner problems on columbines. We get it on Swiss chard, spinach, lilacs, and it forms. So sometimes you see this little path. They've been crawling along eating, but they're eating the two layers between the leaves. So don't even think about spraying. We wouldn't if we're organic gardeners anyway, but some people think there might be a spray they can use. There isn't. Those guys are trapped between the leaves. If you are eating a piece of Swiss chard and you have that little miner in it, you just rip out that piece of leaf and throw it away. If you've got something like a lilac, just deal with it, because eventually the birds will come along and they will sense that it's there and they'll help you with that problem. But you wouldn't want to go around and hand pick off every leaf that has that. That's not going to help.
And you were talking about organic there and things that we don't want to mess with in the garden. What about if you've got a backyard full of weeds? Is there a non-toxic lime product you can use?
No.
Do you know of one?
No. There are sprays that you can use that are that contain vinegar, and you get the super strong vinegar, and so they do sell that at the garden centers now, or you can just buy pickling vinegar. And vinegar itself will kill plants if they're small enough. But remember, vinegar is what we call broad spectrum. It will kill every plant in your garden. So if you spray it on your salvia and your and your dandelion, you're going to kill both. So I'm actually very careful with sprays, even if they're organic or anything like that. And I don't think vinegar is organic, but people are using it thinking it's household, must be safe. Oh, speaking of household, people really love things like borax. And they're talking to me, and my sister called me and she said, oh, I heard you should eat borax if you're feeling like you're a little short on boron. I was like, no, never, ever. Boron is needed in very tiny quantities, enough that you would get enough of it if you used kelp. But if you start to add it, it comes in the little ant traps. Ant traps are nothing but borax, really. It's mixed with oxygen, and it's a killer. It'll kill ants, and it will kill you. So do not never eat boron, never eat borax, never eat washing soda. These are all things that contain boron. And a little bit is good, but a lot is just terrible for you. So all those household products that we have in our cupboards that we think are safe, not so.
Colleen Parker, big hello to you. Colleen, we did answer your question at the start of the show. Not sure if you just joined us, but hello.
Hi, Colleen. Gave a little recap on your friend's rhubarb. So just make sure it's not in the full heat, and make sure it's mulched, and make sure east and sort of southwest. And because she's growing in Okotoks, it does need that little bit of extra water to get it through the season.
Awesome. Here we go. Pay her forward, Donna.
Okay. Well, I think we already said that last week we were on CBC in BC. Next week, I will be in CBC in Alberta. So I'm coming back into Alberta next week, and I'll be there on Friday. So that's June 22nd. Meanwhile, this week, I've got a column in the Calgary Herald. And if you want to know where you can go and walk your dog and look at pretty flowers all at once, that's in this Thursday's Calgary Herald. Or you can read that online. It's a post-media newspaper. I also should mention that I love following other gardening groups. So I'm part of the Aerosmith organic gardening group. I follow along, and sometimes I'm just lurking, and sometimes I contribute a little answer or two. I could be busy full-time answering those questions. But I also really like the Canadian Gardeners group. I've signed up to them recently, and they are lots of good questions coming on. And I think I saw that leaf miner question on there. But I know that that's one that people will be paying attention to, because those are just coming out now. And the Gardening Fanatics of Vancouver Island. That's such a crazy name for a group. I have to love them too. And so I'm also following them. So I hope you're following me. I'm trying to follow you, and I love gardening. And if you haven't got that yet,
get it.
You'll never get it.
We'll not get it.
And I will be doing more little episodes of Little Jobs in the Garden. Everybody loves the Little Jobs in the Garden, and I especially love them because they're so quick and easy to film. And this week we're looking in details, things like more about hummingbirds and pots, little pots we can pot up for hummingbirds, as well as
pruning roses, deadheading.
Deadheading. Every year I get the same question. So we're going to do that, and that will be airing on Wednesday morning. So thanks so much for joining us.